right, welcome to the May 25th work session of the Penfield Planning Board. Also would like to
Mr. Hetzke.
call the roll. Here.
Bastian.
Here.
Knauer. Oh, sorry, he's absent. Tidings.
Here.
Burton.
Here.
Nersinger.
Here.
Sangster.
Here.
O'Connor.
Here.
Weissar.
Here.
Okay.
Minutes.
We got minutes from the last meeting.
Any thoughts, corrections?
Any thoughts, corrections? I think I got an echo going.
There is an echo going here. Yeah. Come in.
Yeah.
Make that.
Sure.
I'll move to approve. Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded.
Hetzke.
Aye.
Bastian.
Aye.
Burton.
Aye.
Tidings.
Aye.
Okay.
Echo, still echo going. I feel like we're in a concert hall or something.
I'm just going to speak up. Doug, if you get out of that, which I don't know how, or just turn it off with that button by pressing it. What? Maybe not.
Speaker.
Oh well, carry on.
You can probably unplug it.
On to our tabled applications.
Yes. All right.
Shall I?
Yeah, please do.
No problem. I'd love to. Bayview Landing. Usually I tell this to Bob as he's the lead on it, but Bob is not here tonight. No updates from Bayview Landing. I anticipate at some point they'll be coming back to the town board to discuss more of their options. Until then, if anyone would like to continue table, make a motion for that.
I'll move to continue table. Second.
Bastian,
Tidings.
Hetzke.
Aye.
Bastian.
Aye.
Burton.
Aye.
Tidings.
Aye.
Alright. Next tabled application. The Panorama Trail micro cell site by Verizon. Let's see here. The board was provided updates on Friday that included updated site plans, one that showed an updated elevation drawing that Doug is pulling up on the screen right now. As the applicant mentioned during the public hearing, that several of the equipment, I'll call them modules, that were proposed to be attached to the pole, several of those were removed or reduced in size, and we have an elevation drawing that reflects that now. I believe it was a generator switch, a convenience switch. One of the switch mechanisms was removed, and the main panel box was shrunk down. The generator plug was removed because it will be powered by batteries in the event of a power outage for a short term. If not, the macro sites will pick up the rest of it. So those are the changes on the site plans. Any questions on that?
No.
Where do we stand with the ZBA?
The ZBA, it was tabled at the zoning board, pending the planning board's decision here tonight
on seeker.
on seeker.
They're in support of it, but they wanted the planning board to be lead agency.
Well, I see their table and I raise them too.
Yeah.
Back and forth. Yes, so thank you, Pete. So as he said, basically the board typically will do its seeker determination upon making its decision for the proposed application. This evening we've provided, as instructed by the board, a draft approval resolution along with the completed Part 2 and Part 3 EAF for this project. This was a full EAF for the seeker process, as we do for all communication towers. Before we get into that though, the applicant also did provide a set of responses, analysis work from their site selection process, as well as a supplemental RF analysis document. All of these were in responses to the questions the board posed regarding alternate locations, whether or not the antenna could have been mounted to existing poles or somewhere else in the plaza. All of those options were exhausted by the applicant according to the responses, where the existing poles were already maxed out in terms of utilities. lease agreements could not be reached with property owners in a nearby area. And this location is ultimately what addresses their needs for service in the area for the quarter-mile radius that they are trying to provide coverage to for their network. Also, I remember Bob did ask the question if the Linden Ave macro site, the main cell tower, and the nearest
Could be added to.
conventional cell tower that we're used to seeing, if anything could be added to that to help this situation. And part of their responses were that that tower had recently been upgraded for all types of frequencies, and that there are no options for that to help fix this coverage issue down in the Panorama Valley. So, any questions on those updates?
So the process for us would be to declare whether a neg deck, if applicable?
No, this action was, staff would consider it to be an unlisted action, and we've
Right.
approached it as such. Basically, the board would acknowledge that it's lead agency in this project as an unlisted action pursuant to seeker, and that would be captured in the approval resolution,
Okay.
as we typically do for these type of actions.
So we don't necessarily need a separate motion for that.
Well, typically how you do it, so you're acting as lead agency, and typically you would do a motion. Your normal course of action is to handle the neg deck as part of the authorization to allow the chair to sign the EA, the Part 2 EAF. So that's typically, because
That's your determination.
that's
Right.
contained in there.
So we do need,
So
So you
normal
would do it the
process.
normal
So we need-
process.
Normal process.
yeah.
So we have to accept the Part 2 EAF?
Yeah, the Part 2 and Part 3 EAF, or the full EAF, yep.
Okay.
Unless there are other questions about this project before we get into that? No?
Okay.
So that would be the first
I
motion.
move to accept the Part 2, Part 3 EAF. Is that one or two?
It's all the same,
Okay.
same document.
I didn't know if it was going to be two separate.
You have a second?
No.
Yeah, I'll second.
Tidings with a second?
I defer to the chief.
Hetzke,
Thank you.
Aye.
Bastian,
Aye.
Burton,
Aye.
Tidings.
Aye.
Okay.
Because in the draft resolution, it will reflect that you're acting as lead agency.
Yes.
Okay. And I move to approve the draft resolution.
I'll second.
Hetzke,
Aye.
Bastian,
Aye.
Burton,
Aye.
Tidings.
Aye.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. All set, we'll be in touch with the follow-up items.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night. Next application, 1600 Penfield Road, the office building, former Classy Chassis site.
Mr. Chairman, I will be recusing myself from this proceeding.
Understood. Thanks for mentioning that.
Okay. So part of the board's tabling resolution from the last meeting was for the applicant to provide responses to any and all outstanding comments, including the PRC, which they have done, as well as the Monroe County comments. They provide responses to those as well. We also have updated site plans per those comments, especially with the PRC's comments, as well as updated building elevations that identify the specific colors of all the building materials that will be used on this structure. And Doug's pulling those up now. They've just gone ahead, either on this one or the other one. I think they all call it out. Yeah, this one does a good job on the top elevation.
Standing seam metal roof.
Clay brick. We have more of a cocoa brown metal roof. A cultured stone, desert sand siding. The stone is identified as a Buck County stone.
Outside
Again-
Philadelphia, huh?
So,
Is that Bucks County?
I don't know. But in any case, the board did express it was pretty comfortable with the proposed renderings last time, subject to having this clarification about the colors shown on the plan, so those are there now. The applicant has submitted an application to the zoning board for an area variance for less parking. And the reason for that is because the site, as we know, has gone through a remediation process, and they're trying to minimize the amount of disturbance and excavation to the site following that, and therefore they really are comfortable with the parking spaces they provided on the site plan. Any questions, comments for this project? It'll go to the zoning board next month, but the board could be in a position. We were directed to provide an approval resolution, and the board could do a conditional approval this evening, pending zoning board's approval.
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
We'll have the EAF first.
Yeah, since Bob's not here. Yeah, so I'll make the motion to approve the EAF.
I'll second.
Okay.
Hetzke.
Aye.
Bastian.
Aye.
Burton. Oh, sorry, abstain.
Abstain.
Tidings.
Aye.
All right, thank you. And then the resolution.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve a resolution.
Do you want a condition upon the ZBA approving?
Condition, yeah, upon the approval of the ZBA.
Okay.
I'll second.
Hetzke.
Aye.
Bastian.
Aye.
Tidings.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob.
You will finally get something there.
That's the hope.
You're gonna actually build it?
I
Do believe they are.
All right.
Great.
All right.
He's only sat on the land for 10 years. I'm sure he's in no hurry.
It's almost as old as I am.
All right. Our final tabled item before we go into our miscellaneous topic, the Aldi's on Penfield Road. Oh, Doug's got it up. Perfect. Board asked that the applicant review the landscaping, the condition of the landscaping, and have the input from the landscape consultant. We've done that. Bruce Zaretsky, our landscape consultant, has reviewed the plans, has ultimately suggested that the landscaping it would be better for the site if the landscaping was replaced as opposed to try to be preserved. You run into too many challenges. Applicant agreed to that. They updated their plans accordingly. Bruce saw that and had no further comments, so he was pleased with what they showed. So in terms of landscaping, I think we're pretty much set on that side of it. They did go to the zoning board last week and presented variances or requests for variances for less parking, which was granted, as well as a special permit for signage. That was granted with some conditions. However, in a conversation I had with the applicant on the phone, they're just going to stick with one sign on the building as they have now, and they'll keep their monument sign out front as well. So in terms of site plan, the parking variance was granted, and I'm not sure if there are any other items to really discuss. Impervious surface isn't changing much of this as they're replacing asphalt with the building expansion, and all the designs of the building will match what's out there today, and they're going to reconstruct the loading dock and the dumpster enclosure of the site as well.
I move to approve the site plan application.
Okay, so we'll do the EAF for that.
Oh, you didn't do that?
Not yet.
Okay.
So,
I move to approve the seeker application.
all right.
Second, Allison.
Hetzke.
Aye.
Bastian.
Aye.
Burton.
Aye.
Tidings.
Aye.
And
Now I move to approve the site plan application
Second.
with the conditions stated.
perfect.
Second that too.
Hetzke.
Aye.
Bastian.
Aye.
Burton.
Aye.
Tidings.
Aye.
Okay.
All right.
15 minutes in.
So,
Moving right along here.
don't need that, don't need that. We have one miscellaneous or action item on the agenda this evening, or potential action item. That is for the Eyesite project on Penfield Road at 2142. This is a project that the board has previously reviewed in both 2014 and 15. It received its original approvals in 2014 for site plan. Came back in 15 for a modification to the site plan to make the building slightly larger to accommodate for hallways, offices, the necessary space for the flow inside the building. Since then, the building has been constructed. I believe they're open for business, and the board has requested the applicant come in to discuss the appearance of the building, how it was constructed in relation to how it was approved, or the images and renderings that were presented to the board at the time of approval. As we can see on the screen here, Doug has pulled up recent site photos that staff has taken and provided to the board of what the building looks like now on the ground, and on the right is what was approved by the board from a rendering. We also have elevation drawings that similarly match the elevation drawing on the right. However, before we get too deep into it, I'll acknowledge that the building department did receive the building plans for this project. I went through its building permit review process, and those did very closely match what you see on the left and what you see built today.
But that shouldn't, I mean, if there generally is not a estoppel against the municipality. If the building permit was issued in error, then that's not going to cure it.
Right, I just wanted to have all the cards on the table. Thank you, Pete.
So when we last left off this board discussing this, what we discussed was asking the applicant to submit some illustrations from their design professional to show the board how they might take the existing front facade and modify it to most closely resemble what was previously approved by the board. So, you know, the things that we discussed in particular were the shadow lines, the glazing, the muttons and mullions, the landscaping. I understand that they've submitted an enhanced landscaping plan. You know, there's also there's another architectural element, a little stone wall in the original front elevation out there that in hindsight, since the board approved a front elevation that did not contain a front entry door,
No.
you know, something like that might serve well to kind of shield that. So, you know, falling short of asking them specifically what to do, or directing them on what they might do, we had discussed asking them to tell us what could be done reasonably to provide the town with a front elevation that more closely resembles what the board had approved.
And in response to that, they have, as you said, they have provided an enhanced landscape plan that our landscape consultant has reviewed and is amenable to the proposed and modifications to the landscape plan to green up the building, to offer some more plantings to be installed there, to break up some of the siding elements, some of the elevations, and some of the siding on the building. We've also received sample materials of what's on the building now and some treatments to some of the wood features on the front of the building, some of these accent elements on the signage, as well as on some of the vertical beams. Doug, could you pull up the picture? And I think we can ask the applicant, they're in the audience tonight, but they offered that as kind of a first step. But as you can see, just to try and put some of this in perspective, here are the sample materials. Where you see Eyesite, there's two horizontal beams there, where they were proposed to darken that to offer some contrast to the building, and the 6 beams that you see that break up some of the wood siding, those would also be proposed to be a darker stain from the applicant, and the same treatments would be addressed or applied on the rear of the structure as well. So that is the...
So that would turn to this?
Correct. That is a brown stain that they've added to the existing color that's out there now.
So do we
This is
have,
the
do
type
we
of
have a
material.
rendering or an illustration of what they're proposing?
I believe they just submitted one to the board for the record. Terry's handing those out. And again, anytime if you'd like to discuss with them. So
this shows the, yeah.
this rendering shows what's out there today, along with the wood treatments I just described with the darker stain elements, as well as the proposed landscaping. So they kind of took everything that they have provided for the board to consider and have applied it in this rendering.
So is it your opinion that the mature plant materials that we see in this rendering are consistent with the landscape plan that Bruce reviewed?
I just received this. We could defer that to Bruce, because I am not an expert on all landscaping elements. But we could certainly defer that to Bruce once more to confirm that.
Is this going to be darker too?
No.
Because this is
At printer versus printer. The battle of inks.
Thoughts?
I would love to see their idea on how they might add some bronze shading and shadow line elements to this.
I can speak to that. In previous conversations with the applicant and their architects, from the approved rendering that the board saw in 14 and 15, those elements could not be added to the structure at this time, as those windows could not support those, I'm going to call it, what did you call them? I'm sorry. Those shading elements, shadow lines. Are those what you're referring to, Jim? The shadow lines? Due to the structure of the glass and the frame to it, it wouldn't be able to support those, as they have told us.
So then I guess it would be incumbent upon the applicant to come up with something else that might achieve a similar look. I mean, these are the things that jump out at you that are missing from the previously approved elevation, that restaining some of the architectural elements won't cure. Let's see what they can come up with. Ask them to be creative.
With that note, I have a couple questions. Since you're talking about that elevation still with those items, would you also, are there any thoughts about the, let's call them, that cantilever look of the wood framing, or the wood elements there that kind of go on a diagonal to the building? Is that something the board has any interest in at this time, or are you satisfied with how it's constructed today?
We've not
They wouldn't-
historically given that kind of direction to an applicant. You know, I think we could word our tabling resolution in such a way that gives them some guidance that, you know, we're happy to see that there are some improvements that they're willing to make, but, you know, perhaps there are some other things that they might do that could.
I was just trying to call out those notable
Yeah,
features that you say like stand out, that kind of jump out to you.
Yeah, I don't know if we
they're not
want
on
to
here.
go that far.
I mean, you know, the shade or shadow lines, initially, in my view, I don't know if I ever necessarily noticed them as what they were. They just, in the rendering, it came across as being interesting. So, whether it's that specifically or something similar, or something else that creates a little bit more of a broken up look than just an expanse,
A little more
was
depth,
to
a
me
little more
what
dimension.
was the biggest thing with that. The wood in the front, you know, I think personally, I think this is a good step in the right direction.
I agree.
When you look at the original rendering, there's a lot more texture in the rendering than there is on the actual building. And
Do you want to see the elevation drawing that was also approved at that time? Because sometimes renderings versus
sure,
elevation drawings are... Didn't like you?
I don't know if I can interrupt here, but I might be able to speak to some of the things that you're...
give us a few minutes to,
Okay.
all right?
Whenever you're ready.
So that was the original.
And that stone wall out front is something that definitely softened
Yeah.
the look to the building as well.
That was out in front of that patio, right?
Yeah, again, we can, the applicant's here, we can ask a point of clarification there eventually if you'd like. But it is something that's there. I believe it was on the site plan. I can't remember off the top of my head if it was on the site plan as well. Doug can pull that up though. Looks like something's there.
Okay, Terry, Bill, your thoughts? Heard Jim, heard,
I tend to agree with Jim that they need to come back with something a little more than what they proposed.
I mean, they're saying that they can't meet the, was originally approved? Is that what they're saying? That this is their only option, the closest they can get?
I would say this is the first option. But again, I don't want to speak entirely for the applicant.
So let them come
So,
up and say what they can do.
you want to take a couple minutes to
Explain.
kind of explain the changes and why, and so if you'd want to come up here for a couple minutes.
For those of you that don't know me, my name's Steve Kruger. I took over the architecture of this from Rob Wolf. Rob Wolf was the original designer that prepared the rendering and the concept designs. Once that portion was completed, I took this from concept to construction. And a couple of things that I'd like to speak about. That rendering, I don't know what camera angle was used on it, but that building appears more squatty and longer than what you would see in the camera of a standard 35mm lens that you're seeing here. So there's some perspective things that may change your impression of the building. And then there were constructability issues that were also addressed during the construction phase that I think are worth noting. As you look at those two photos, you see one more boxier building and one longer building. The impression of that photo as well is you can see inside the building. So that building rendering was done at a time of night where you have dusk and you can have backlight, where you're seeing a stark contrast between light and dark of those windows. Now if you took something at dusk where you could see the interior spaces of the building, you might have again a more refined or a different perspective on the depth and the layering of that facade. The construction documents, the actual elevations came from Rob Wolf. We took the elevations that were provided that I assume were used during the preparation of these facade elements and adapted them. There were, again, some functionality issues. We removed the bottom layer of glass because the doctors needed to have display case space in the building. It was my understanding that that bottom row was to be spandrel glass anyway and would show up as a different element than the other glass. Some of the constructability issues, the heavy timber wood that's shown in there was all called out to be cedar, so the impression of the differing color is something that we've attempted to recreate here as an element that, you know, could offset some of your concerns about the color temperature of the wood right now. That is a freshly stained red cedar. It's very orange. It hasn't had a chance to weather and turn out more of the barnwood style that you'll see in a couple of years as it takes its weathered state. So I think between the perspective, the camera angle that was used, the time of day, and the things you can do with the rendering that you can't do during real life, those elements should be appreciated in the concept versus real life situation. The sunscreens, again, they were a constructability issue. The storefront system cannot support an independently cantilevered sunscreen. So we adapted that into utilizing a film to beat solar heat gain, to accomplish the same objectives of, energy savings in the building.
So let me just get this right. So the original design anticipated structural moles, and those were eliminated in the final construction documents. Is that what you're telling us?
There would have had to been a steel superstructure behind that in order to support a sunscreen element.
Or structural mullions?
Or structural molds.
Yes.
With
Okay.
steel reinforcement.
So that was eliminated in the final construction documents. So, we don't want to debate how you value engineered certain things in or out of the building. If the aluminum framing system can't accommodate the cable tiebacks, perhaps you could show us something else that you might do that might present some visual interest to the building, to add some more dimension and to add some shadow lining. We don't want to tell you what to do or how to do it. We'd just like you to come back and tell us what types of things that you might come up with creatively that could enhance the look of the building and make it look more in concert with what the board approved. I'm sure you're aware that the town has received some unfavorable comments from the public.
I don't know if you guys are aware, but we've, from the architectural community, have received a lot of praise on this building as well. So I can understand it's different, so you're probably going to have opinions on both sides, and obviously that's why we're here tonight to discuss those.
Right, and ultimately it's up to this board to determine how this does get addressed based on what was originally saw and reviewed or approved. What was represented to the board back in 2014, and how that's going to be addressed now.
We can certainly talk to the owners of the building. I can't speak on their behalf on what they are willing or not willing to do, and I would have to go back and review in more depth exactly what was approved versus what was built and how it was written into the approval documents. I'm certainly willing to work within their guidelines or advice on what to come up with for you.
It's also from a fairness point of view too, because I've represented this board for a number of years, and there have been a lot of times where the applicant will get an approval and then they'll want to come back and change a color or change a little design element, and this board is usually pretty strict about that, and so that's part of what's going on here too, is that this was changed without coming back to this board. So
okay, from my understanding, the colors were not defined on the approval documents, and as we discussed on site, it was always intended to be a charcoal versus redwood. I was not involved in that process, but that is what I understand were on the elevations.
And I can confirm that the elevation drawings that were provided during the time of approval, site plan approval back in 14, they do not specifically call out an exact color to the materials on the building. I believe there's a portion of it that says color to be chosen by architect. So there is that element. Steve,
And that,
Steve,
with that being
you're
said,
not
it
wrong in saying
didn't
that.
raise a red flag that we're doing a deviation sufficient to trigger.
Well, I think
Asking for an adjustment.
there are several different things here. I mean, the color is one of them. If the color was the only thing, then there's a very good chance that we wouldn't be sitting here. The color, you know, you rightly point out that we neglected to spell that out. And I guess we will strive to be more diligent in the future to spell out exactly all the building materials, if that's, you know, where this has to go.
Yeah, I'm
But,
just saying is it didn't draw a red flag.
You can't really totally agree that, you know, what was built looks like what was approved, and that there's some pretty
I don't
significant
disagree. I'm
differences
just saying
in
that
there. And
with some perspective issues, you can, the time of day issues. I think when you look at this and then you look at that, if we put it in the exact same perspective and found a way to stretch that image out a little longer, that it's more closely relatable than I feel like it's being perceived to be.
Well, we're missing all of the ornamental cable ties.
Okay, I would agree with that.
We're missing the shadow lines. You've got 6 divided lights in the original. You've got 5 divided lights in the actual.
Look at the roof line.
And the roof line's different, and the perception
The
of
bump is there in the back.
the perception
it's
of
not the
yes.
photo.
of the color that was presented, that people are looking at, and when they're offering, you know, an opinion and approval, that certainly looks more in the brown or natural tone family than what was. So it's not just one or two things. There's a number of things here that did change, and you know, I don't think it's unreasonable for the town to ask you to show us what might be done to improve that and get us closer to what was there.
So
we don't wanna...
the approved landscape plan and the variation in the vertical elements is not enough, is what I'm understanding.
Well, you're talking about adding some stain color to some existing issues.
Right, which is what is shown on that wood framing there. It's the same material
Yeah.
with a different coloration.
I mean, other board members, I don't want to put it all on.
No, that's okay.
Jim.
You know, we can take another straw polls, but you know, I don't believe that what's being offered here is consistent with what we previously discussed in terms of getting some more creative ideas from the applicant as to what might be done, and then reacting to that as we typically would.
I'm in agreement with Jim. I think they need to come back, show us what else can be done to move closer to the original, what we approved.
Definitely.
Excuse me. Can I just speak for a minute? When it's appropriate.
All right. 4 minutes. And I'm not sure what you have to say, but
I just have some clarifications about the drawings, which, my name's Kevin Fior Construction, I'm the contractor. Okay. I just wanted to clarify a few things that I think from the original drawing and the perception may not be what the board may have an idea of, something that was on that original drawing that doesn't exist today, and so I was just looking for a couple minutes of clarification. That's all.
okay.
If I can, you know, have the time.
Yeah.
Okay. The existing building is the same dimension as the original one. The amount of cedar in front, like right there on the right, that's showing cedar, and it's colored just like the cedar to the left is. That is the same size, okay? I mean, the cedar on the left picture may look like it's greater, but I think if you go look at the drawings and get the scale on the drawing that was presented, it's the same scale there, it's just appearing differently. Yes, the windows had like 6 blocks in them originally, now they have 5. I mean, I studied this building a lot. I believe it's the same scale. A door was added in the front, but I would hazard a guess a door in the sidewalk was added that's not on the site plan. That might be original, but I'm thinking that was an egress issue with a life safety issue. I mean, I'm not positive of that, but I'm thinking back that that's why the door in the sidewalk went in and the wall went away, because it became a means of exit. The bottom of the glass is, and the height of the building is the same, and the length of the building is the same. The amount of that gray siding over the windows and in that rendering is the same. It didn't get shorter, okay? Part of what you're seeing here in this rendering, this one-dimensional, is you're seeing the screen wall that's set back 20 feet, that's hiding the rooftops. So it's not like that wall disappeared. In reality, if you look close, you can see there's roof flashing that comes across above those windows, okay? As far as the big timbers in front holding the horizontal, there's a note on these drawings that say timber or cabling or brackets. Well, we did brackets. I mean, it is over on the left, it is a architectural item. I mean, so the front is cedar. It's just the coloring is not as different as it is in the picture or the presentation. In the presentation, even on the 1x6 vertical, I mean, the architect changes it so you can get a visual, I think. But I believe if we take the construction drawings and the original drawings, the amount of glass, clear glass is the same, except for 6 or 8 inches on the bottom, because the bottom of that glass there you see is blacked out on the right-hand side. It's blacked out. So instead of being blacked out, it became siding. And it really is the difference between looking at an actual photo and looking at a drawing. But the drawing is not, I mean, it's not reality well, it is reality to the picture, it just doesn't appear that way. I mean, the whole building in the picture looks like it's 30 feet shorter.
And just
lengthwise.
To your point about the building plans, that's not something that this board sees. Typically how
they just got straight elevations?
Yes, this board
with
works
no
off
dimensions?
This board, well, yeah, no, there are dimensions, but this board works off the elevations,
Right.
the front elevations, side renderings, colors,
Right.
and so forth. When a building plan comes in, though, that goes up to the building department only.
Yeah, I got it.
So in the past, in the past, the town and this board and the building department, typically what we're accustomed to seeing is a product out there in the real world that closely matches what the board sees. And I think
Right.
that's where a lot of it started. And I get your point. I just wanted to clarify for the record that our process here eventually gets to a building plan, but this board doesn't see building plans.
Right. I'm just, the only point that I'm making is that the photos of the building, I'm not talking about the gray, but the amount of glass, believe it or not, the proportion of the amount of glass, the amount of cedar in the middle, the amount of glass, and the amount of siding on the sides of the glass is actually what's on that proposal. It just doesn't appear that way because the building in the proposal looks 3 times bigger, longer.
Right,
I mean,
that's what Steve was saying earlier.
right, so I'm saying the actual physical amount of cedar and the physical amount of glass and the physical amount of siding is really proportional to what's in the building or in the proposal. Yes, the sunscreens are missing, and there's something that were horizontal. I mean, when you look straight at the building, you wouldn't even notice the sunscreens. I mean, you'd see them on an angle because they're horizontal protection. I will say I'm in control of landscape. It's in my contract, and they have spent some substantial additional dollars to increase the amount of landscaping in relation to this issue, okay? The landscaping has been substantially increased in dollar cost. I see your point about the door, it does not exist, but I believe the door came, and I'm not positive.
I can't answer it either.
Right, but
I'm
I
not the
believe
fire
if
marshal.
we researched, the door came in because on the square footage, they had to have,
It's the second means of egress.
second means,
Out of the front.
right, and then a sidewalk was added to the sidewalk. So at that point, the wall, the
Everything's
landscape
changed.
wall disappeared when the door came in. And I appreciate your time, it's all that I really wanted to
Which is
say.
surprising because there was a door in the building plans we received from Wolf, so
It's shown in the elevation as well, at the colored one. So you can see that.
I would like to make a motion that we
Right, it's
table
right
this
there.
application.
Yeah.
There's the door.
Permit, excuse me, to
I'm sorry.
permit the applicant to submit another plan to the board that shows how that they might add some architectural elements to this building to more closely resemble the original renderings and elevations approved by the board.
I'll second.
And also would part of this include the review of the proposed landscaping in relation to the rendering
I
by
think that
our
was-
landscape consultant? Or are you comfortable with what he reviewed on the site plans and the plant schedule?
Well, I think the contractor's right. I mean, if in fact this very mature planting material is what they have in mind, then certainly this goes a long way towards taking away from the more plain facade that we're looking at today. So I think it's fair to ask Bruce to see not just the species of plants, but the size of the material that they're proposing to install here. And that those comments going back to the applicant might help the architect with coming up with an alternative plan for some other architectural improvements.
Okay, yeah, just as I said before, he looked at it on the site plan perspective of it, but now we have a picture here.
I also think that that stone retaining wall being put back in might go a long way towards taking away from the door that
Yeah, right now, it looks like they got boxwood or some type of hedge
it was awfully small.
in the,
Could I just ask a question about that? Is it okay? The idea with the boxwoods was that
Doctor, would you mind coming up just so we capture it? Thank you, I'm sorry.
I'm Dr. Justin Barone, one of the owners. So the idea with the boxwoods was actually just hopefully that you guys would like that better, not that we were, because we were kind of, the landscaping kind of got paused when you guys showed up last month and said, we need to talk. So we kind of put that on hold, and the idea was that the boxwoods would grow together like, you know, you see it in English Castle, where they would be tall, sculpted, and high, you know, and they would protect that lower portion of the wood. Now, you know, if we're hung up on that and that's something that's going to help us move in the right direction, obviously we can look at that, but that's not a cheap thing that because we've kind of moved some money into the landscaping that we weren't anticipating, plus we're restaining some stuff. There's still, obviously you guys are looking for a little more. I mean, this is starting to add up. And that is a concern for me. And I know you guys have your concerns, but I just wanted to clarify the boxwoods thing. Now, I know they are small, but we actually were only going to have 4. I said, let's put 6 in. Let's get them very close together so there's no gaps, so they are visually blocking to kind of replace the retaining wall in a way that there's no visual pass through.
okay. So, from the sounds, I guess the way I'm seeing this is the proposed
This proposal?
mitigation of the board's concerns originally is not exactly sufficient, and you guys would like to see some other ideas. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Okay. So I have I have two matters on the tabling motion. To see a revised or an architecture, a building design that gets more similarly matched to the original approvals by the board.
Or
What elements
something else
can-
creative that
Yes.
they might come up with that.
Yes, something to enhance the front elevation of
The
the
look and the
building.
depth and dimension and color.
I'll ask this because there are 4 sides of this building. You're going to have entrance from the back as well. Would you like to see similar treatments or creativity brought to the rear of the building? Doug, if you could pull up a photo of the rear of the building. It should be in that set that you have.
I didn't.
Oh,
we never took a
in
picture
my
of the rear
set
of the
that has-
building.
In my set that has 6 on it.
Those earlier.
This is the side.
Yeah.
But
Yep,
the earlier
if
versions.
you-
Yeah, I got it from last time. These
That
these
one
photos
says-
here? What did you get?
Yes.
Yeah.
Terry has a picture there.
Yes.
If you
Yeah.
scroll down.
I don't think so, Zach. I mean, unless it's, you know,
I'm just trying to cover all,
Yeah.
literally trying to cover all
unless
angles.
it's a corner lot or you know, some other unusual factor, we typically have
You're thinking
focused
street
our
view.
attention on the street front face of the building and at the other sides of the building.
But Jim, if they're gonna paint, if they go, they're just a darker, I mean, obviously they're gonna paint the whole building darker, right?
Well, I'm not sure that
You're talking about
planning
you're talking about the staining elements,
Yeah,
Terry?
if they
vertical
just a
elements.
staining, yeah.
that staining is only going to go on the wood.
Yeah, well,
So-
Well, and only on, like, the proposal is only on
front.
these vertical elements
So,
here.
yeah, so
And that's
those,
to
So we're just
break
talking about
up.
the front, so we don't care about the rest of the building at this point? I mean, so this is not gonna match, but if,
Doug's kind of highlighting it here on the left, where there are similar
I
elements.
think,
yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty bad though if it doesn't
these-
match, no?
Well, these would be stained too, the back, those vertical elements.
Well, that's
on
what
the
I'm
back,
saying, yes.
And the cross
Yeah,
beam.
anything to look, that's what I'm saying.
And I just wanted to clarify that because we haven't really talked about the back of the building, but
What Jim's saying is just worried
There's
about the
this-
front though.
right.
It
And I
doesn't match.
just want to ask for everybody.
When you look at the back, I mean, honestly, I guess I don't really want to
who sees it?
design, but.
Well, there's the
no,
main entrance.
But
Yeah, but
those supports on there are more in line with what was, you know, potentially could be used on the front. See, those seem larger than the ones on the
Yeah.
front.
yeah, they do. They do. What's missing is the cable braces, those ornamental steel cable braces.
That's it.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
front
that's
seems
question.
like it's just this,
That was my other question.
Missing things?
yeah.
I'm not trying to put words, I'm suggesting
Yeah,
words
no,
for you, I'm
just-
sorry.
It's the combination of a number of things. If it was one or two things, that I don't think that we'd be sitting here, but it's, okay, there's, the color is one, the shade, the sunshades are another, the
Front door is one, the
structural.
retaining wall is one.
Yeah, and the front door, I think,
buttons and mullions is one.
was
Is
a
huge
fire
one.
marshal thing.
No, but you know what?
You could have done it in
The original building, that front elevation was only developed after a floor plan was developed. You don't bring an elevation out of thin air
Right.
without knowing how the space flows inside. They changed that floor plan. Somewhere along the line, that floor plan got changed. And that's when one of the staff in the town discovered that they needed another remote means of egress. Either way, it's on them to furnish a set of plans that comply with the code. And
Yeah, that's what they were doing.
If you guys look at the elevations, there's a door shown. I think maybe the loss in translation is that door could have been clad in cedar.
All the original
Correct.
drawings?
Yeah, if you look down there, you'll see a diagonal.
Yeah, right there.
So that door was always intended to be there. It was in the floor plan. And if I've had any translation of the rendering to that, then I would take credit for not cladding it in cedar. But it made sense that you could see out the door you were going through.
Well, then, if that's the case, that door wouldn't comply with code because you cannot conceal an exit door
Exactly.
that makes it lose its appearance as an obvious means of entrance and exit.
Which is
Yeah,
why it's
yeah.
glass.
I think that was just
So another
his
reason
point
why
of
it was
clarity as
changed.
well.
Well, another reason why what was presented to the board and what was billed, there's a delta there.
I phrase it as like
So,
a disconnect
anyhow,
between
there's
all parties.
There's a tabling motion out there.
I heard one, and I believe Bill had a second for it. Staff will issue a letter on behalf of the board with those items. Board will meet again.
We need to take a vote here.
Yes, just for the applicant's sake, the board meets again on June 8th, where this could be another discussion item on that agenda as well, following the public hearing or in the work session prior, however the board would like to treat it. But yes, of course, a vote.
Okay, Hetzke.
Aye.
Bastian.
Aye.
Burton.
Aye.
Heidi.
Night.
Okay. Thank you. We'll be in touch.
So we're not doing June 8th, you're not,
No, I would plan on June 8th.
okay. And that'll be this kind of thing?
Yes.
Or, okay.
There's a public hearing that night though too, so it's either gonna be, I don't know. isn't it?
It's either going to be, depending, I will likely say that the discussion could take place between our 6:30 and 7 o'clock work session. And then 7 o'clock, we have a public hearing meeting for another application.
Okay.
And then once that's done, we'd come back to the work session after if we haven't concluded the discussion then.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other matters that the board would like to discuss? I have no other items on the agenda this evening.
I will not be here on June 8th. I'll be in Texas.
Okay.
Houston.
I plan to be here on June 8th.
You're here, right?
I'm here. Yeah. You know, I just drew
Do
in.
you want to close or talk?
Is there a reason why we can't do cable? Or they,
No, those ornamental cables can go in, they don't have to serve a structural purpose.
Yeah.
They can go in anytime. And that happens to be a very hot element in
Today.
the architecture.
and they only have to do the cable in the front, not
All right.
right there, entrance, right? So,
Well, why don't we let them come back with something? And if nobody has anything else at the moment, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thanks everybody for coming.